So I will be very brief in introducing Antoinette. I know you like to call yourself an interdisciplinary thinker, but I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to call you transdisciplinary as a thinker. I don't know how you feel about it. I find it better. That's why I do the push. Okay. You're very proud of your background in law, from what I know, but I think also your work, I mean, starting from the human genomes and neoliberal governance, right? That was one of your first books. Up to the neologism, the most recent one, as you call it, the algorithmic governmentality, I find it imperative in understanding what is going on around us from perspectives which are not the most expected. And I'm pretty sure you're going to give us some of those perspectives now. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I don't have the words to express my gratitude to the organizers to have me here. And at the same time, I don't know if I must thank them because I feel completely intimidated. And I'm intimidated because indeed I'm a lawyer. And I'm a lawyer, and I feel completely lost in a nest of Deleuze Guattarians. And I don't know, but the good thing is that they put me at the end. So I had the time to locate the emergency exits. So I feel more reassured. And you too, I'm sure. If I say things that you dislike, instead of throwing tomatoes to me, you can take the exit as well. I won't take it personally. We are all in a deep fatigue. But what I will do is precisely an eloge of fatigue. I think fatigue is important. And, you know, as I told you, I feel in a suicidal mission also because, and I will plead guilty from the start, I think. I will throw you that like that. I think that the affirmative philosophy of Gilles Deleuze offers, and Félix Guattari, offer little resistance to algorithmic governmentality, or what I call today algorithmic realism. Because treating algorithmic realism and algorithmic governmentality treat materiality as pure flows of intensities, just like Deleuze. As for Deleuze, objects are merely lateral dependencies of relations, the fixed deposits of dynamic relations, a fatigue in the relation, whereas being is fundamentally relational. AI models of today are indeed absolutely Deleuzian, but without the fatigue. So I will speak today about a lot of things. I will speak about algorithmic realism. Why is it that I speak of algorithmic realism now? In fact, I want to suggest a shift from recognition of forms to detection of signals, a shift from truth regimes and the temporary establishment and discussion and veridiction procedures of temporary truth to production of purely speculative space, which are spaces of reliability without truth. A shift from normativity, from normative regime, to regimes of digital facticity. A shift also from the long and slow sedimentation of text. That's where I feel more comfortable as lawyer, text and sign, interpretable sign, to something completely different, to an anarchive of data and algorithms. So I will also, I say it like that, I know it's discussable, but I impose it to you like that. I think that AI today, or at least AI as ideology today, or algorithmic realism, operates as an immune system of capitalism against all that should urgently interrupt its flaws. What could urgently interrupt its flaws? The world itself, in its radical indeterminacy, in the fact that the real, and we could compare that to Lacan's real, the world itself is precisely that which resist any attempt of formalization and computation. But algorithmic realism just shortcut the world. What could resist also, and what should resist? Life, the normativity of life itself. And I'm sure you have read Canguilhem in this regard. And normativity of life, which carries with it an intelligence of limits, fundamentally an intelligence of limits, or what Bernard Stiegler would call negantropy, a way of limiting the deperdition and the overconsumption of everything. Third, algorithmic realism or capitalism on algorithmic steroids, in fact, bypass also subjects, both individual and collective subjects, by fragmenting all kinds of forms, subjective and collective forms, preventing, preempting, impeaching, it's not any kind of collective action or structuration. So that's why I provided you with this awful abstract, algorithmic realism, Anarchive or Utopia. I read the abstract to you. The contemporary world is characterized by an increasing reliance on automated systems that substitute computation for representation in order to comprehend and manage reality. But that reality poses a lot of problems. What kind of reality is this? This technological dynamic of algorithmic realism or algorithmic anarchive shifts the boundaries and threshold of an-optic perception to include pre- and infra-semiotic, infra-political digital signals, virtually pushing back the limits of representability to infinity. And in the same time, or through the same gesture, by abolishing its outside, it also abolishes representation itself. So that's where we're happy. Deleuzians must be happy. At last, we are done with representation, with recognition, with all these forms that always, entrap life. No. In this talk, I will argue that the fundamental challenge that the algorithmic anarchive poses to the persistence of critique, and this is the existential risk. The existential risk of AI is an existential risk for critique, thus for politics, thus for thought, thus for utopia. This talk, I will argue that the fundamental challenge that the algorithmic anarchive poses to the persistence of critique is not so much as lawyers and AI ethicists pose it. It's not so much the lack of transparency of algorithmic black boxes, but rather the denial or the disavowal of the opacity of the world itself, of life itself, of subjects themselves. An ontological opacity, not an epistemic opacity, but really an ontological opacity, invincible. An indeterminacy that is precisely not what we have to unveil, because that would be apocalyptic, that would be full transparency and apocalypse. It's not what we have to unveil or inquire about, but it is that negativity, sorry for the word, the negativity that forces us to convene, to speak, to imagine, to create forms, to take shape in what I call the frailure. Sorry, it's a very bad neologism. It's a compression of failures of representation, failures of data, les angles morts, the failures, and frayeur, meaning the frailty, the fragility, the affectability, all the affectabilities that, in fact, that in fact, through which it is through these failures that the universality, sorry again for the term, that the universality of the negative, a negative universality, of the non-totalisable, of incompleteness, of, as Denise Ferreira da Silva says it, the refusal to disappear and the refusal to comply manifests itself in the particular as an immanent utopia, a project without prediction rather than a prediction without any project. So that's the abstract. So for those who want to take the exit, you can take them now. Because now I will enter into some more intricate parts. In fact, I have to relate to Gilles Deleuze, because you can have the impression here that I will make a football match between the Frankfurt School and the French theory. And of course, I will not try to do that, because of course, I'm alone and you are all a team. So I've lost already, for sure. But yet, what I will try, and I tell you right away my provisory temporary conclusions. I think we have to keep the concepts and to, as Adorno said it, overcome concepts through concepts. You know, that's the metabolism of the law, by the way. That's the negativity that the law preserves against full transparency and full apocalypse and full injustice. Doing justice to experience presupposes that we keep that idea that we can only overcome concepts through concepts. And we never attain to the pre-semiotic, to the infra-semiotic, to the infra-politic. We are people of forms and of concepts, and we don't exist outside of the forms that we give to ourselves, to the shapes we give to ourselves. And that's our facticity, and that's the reason why natural intelligence is absolutely artificial. It's much more artificial than the said artificial intelligence, but that would be another debate. So Gilles Deleuze, in 1990, noted in his postscript on controlled societies that it is easy to match, not so easy, I can tell, it is easy to match each society with types of machines, not because the machines are decisive, but because they express the social forms capable of giving rise to them and making use of them. So my questions are this: what are the social forms expressed by learning machines called artificial intelligences? But also, what are the social forms and the forms of social relations produced by this, or generated, we say today, by this algorithmic turn, and from which the new digital facticity inherits its ontological plasticity? I will not be able here to describe in full length that type of society or the type of imaginary disinstitution of society, such algorithmic intermediation or disintermediation of production, knowledge, power, subjects, and even time, we heard, produce. Just a few words about these that should be read as nothing more than expressionist indications of the new spirit or the new no-spirit of digital capitalism. I must say, I think I will never exit from my introduction. I'm sorry, but it's a working concepts. Concepts work like that. They work against themselves. So I'm a Penelope. I always. So I continue. Nevertheless, I must say that the craze for AI, the enthusiasm for AI, or even, as Claudia Arado said, the AI imperative, or the smartness mandate, as Orit Halpern says, all this, this craze for algorithmic decision-making or for making data the privileged coordinates of social modulation and social modelization and social everything and data, and that's it. All this is not a cause. It's not the cause of something. It's not something, a cause that has come to us from the sky like that, It is rather a symptom. And it's not a pharmacon either. I must say, that I diverge from Bernard Stiegler in that respect. It is rather a symptom. It's a symptomatic of a transformation in the way the world we want to order the world, a mode of it's not even a mode of ordering the world, it's a mode of disordering the world. It's symptomatic of the insertion of speculation at the very heart of governmental rationalities. Contrary to what has often been claimed, the traction gained by the idea of algorithmic governance depends on a complete reversal of the deterministic idea that the world and social phenomena are governed either by predictable, detectable, governable regularities or by social physics, and that, in fact, human behaviors, among other things, would be measurable or calculable in reference to an average or a normal law. It is exactly the opposite. My thesis is that the reason why we want algorithm, why we want AI, is precisely because the contemporary era is characterized by an acute consciousness of radical contingency and instability of the bio, geo-physical, social, political milieu, and that we cannot deal with that contingency. It's precisely that. In Europe, for example, the imperative to adapt to AI innovations, explicitly proclaimed in the very title of the white paper, the EC, European Commission white paper on artificial intelligence, a European approach to excellence and trust, published by the European Commission some time ago, reflects in particular the growing influence of the innovation principle. It's not a democratic principle at all. It's something that has been imposed by the lobbies since 1983, by the European Risk Forum, which is a lobby, but that's another story. Yeah? But it was in order to combat the principle of precaution. The industry came with a principle of innovation in order to combat the precaution. So all this is symptomatic of a European growth model strategically combining climate and ecological transition. That's in the text. Combining climate and ecological transition and digital transition. The new European growth model within an ethical and green digital capitalism, that's, it's written like that, it's a quotation, converts the prospects of climatic, ecological, social, and psychic collapse into promises of resilience, infinite growth, and increased social well-being. This rhetorical twinning of the green and digital transition, formally postulating a kind of equal urgency between the two, is a good illustration of the contemporary link between, on the one hand, that acute awareness of instability and invincible complexity of the biophysical world that has been explored by Luigi Pellizzoni, and on the other hand, a faith in the capacity of learning machines to mitigate the implications of radical complexity and instability, or even better, to convert contingency into growth. There is a faith in the ability of learning machines that metabolize big and not so big, but fast data to manage the implications of this uncertainty or contingency. So that's the reason that with the rise of AI common sense, the question of whether AI is appropriate at all becomes just unthinkable, as asking it would interrupt the move towards a more digital technology, more data, more interoperability, and more AI. That's Arado who says that. The ubiquitous injunction, as it appears today, is no longer so much to opt or to choose AI, as it is to adapt to it and to convert to it. The 2022 Oxford Insights publication, Government AI Readiness, states that in its very title, recalling what Margaret Mead said that in 1953, that the machine is not body patterned. It has its own existence, its own rhythm, to which man must submit. It should be pointed out that the acute awareness of contingency we are talking about, I just repeat that to be sure, differs not only from pre-modern conceptions of regularities reflecting a natural order, like, for example, in Ketley, in all the pioneers of statistics, but also from the scientific conceptions aimed at discovering through the observation the law of a contingent nature. This awareness of radical contingency is an awareness of ontological and not merely epistemic character of indeterminacy. So, this acute awareness of contingency and instability is not due merely to the proliferation of contemporary crises, climatic, ecological, health-related, and so on, and to the recognition of the ontological indeterminacy inherent in materiality or matter itself, as quantum physics has taught us. It is also due to democracy itself. Democracy also, as Claude Lefort reminds us, the essential thing, as he sees it, is that democracy is established and maintained in the dissolution of the landmarks of certainty. It inaugurates a history in which human beings are put to the test of a final indeterminacy as to the basis of power, law, and knowledge, as well as the basis of the relationship between the one and the other, in all areas of social life. Wherever a division was once expressed, in particular the division between those in authority and those who were subject to them because of a belief in the nature of things or in a supernatural principles, and now all this has been, that's modernity, I don't go deep in that, but this led Lefort to believe that in social practice, unbeknownst of the actors, there is a question that no one can answer, and that the work of ideology, always dedicated to restoring certainty, cannot put to an end. So I hold that today the rise of algorithmic regimes, algorithmic governmentality, algorithmic realism, are not the opposite, but the most achieved incarnation of democracy's paradox, a disincarnated incarnation. The task assumed by the datafication and algorithmization, or by the computational turn, is precisely the task that Claude Lefort assigned to ideology, the restoration of certainty in a democratic society characterized by indeterminacy. So, no, I promised to speak of archive. In fact, or Anarchive. It's quite difficult to speak of archive when what you are studying are only flows of data and changing patterns that are evolving in real time and so on. But what I can talk about is at least the changing modes of production of meaning, and the changing mode of exercise of power, and changing mode of the production of the self, and the changing mode of the production of time. Of course, I will not have time to cover all this. So I rush just to say a few things. Of course, transforming algorithmic realism and algorithmic governmentality are changing the mode of production and the mode of extractivism, of course. Algorithmic governmentality appears as a more than human and less than human biopolitics, as Birpuhar puts it, having as instrumentalized unit neither the individual or the human, neither the workers' productive bodies and minds, at least not explicitly, but the individual and the inhuman, not the forms of life, but the deterritorialized and dehistoricized digital reductions, abstractions, fragmentations of life forms. Of course, in the blind spot is the continuation of colonialism by other means. You know that, for example, OpenAI pays people in Kenya $2 or $3 a day to curate the data that serves as the training data and all the data that is used by OpenAI for ChatGPT and so on. So that's harsh colonialism and even slavery, if you wish. So the economic, the digital economy appears something like very cloudy. You know, it doesn't touch anything, but in fact, it's really cannibalistic. It eats the flesh and bones of people. Huh? But that's in the blind spot, you see? That's why it's ideologic in that way also. It hides all the conditions of its own production, you know? Like all the infrastructure disappears, becomes seamless, but you have to know that each time you type something, to ask something or want to chat with ChatGPT, you are sustaining that kind of system of slavery. So changing modalities of production and extractivism. Also, it can be seen like, you know, as explicitly stated by the European Commission, Europe's current and future economic growth and societal well-being are increasingly based on the value created by workers? No, by data. By data, you see? It's in the white paper AI, a European approach to excellence and trust again. So bodies become relatively indifferent. It is not important to produce docile and vigorous bodies, to produce a productive population, except for the essential workers, of course, who are intensively and extensively disciplined. So it's a mixture of discipline and something else that is still to be described. It is at most a question of avoiding that bodies surface to interrupt or slow the flows. So changing techniques, also techniques of domination, of course, the convergence of behavioral economics with dynamic systems of differentiation, which are called scoring, ranking, pairing, profiling, targeting, and so on, give rise to novel strategies of nudging, libertarian paternalism, bypassing individual reflexivities, massively individual and collective reflexivities, massively interpersonal persuasion, psychographic targeting, are all quite different from the old techniques of discipline, and I would say a little bit different from control as well. Focusing preemptively on effects rather than preventively on causes of behaviors, algorithmic governmentality naturalizes the state of affairs. It produces a facticity obfuscating the power relations and dominations whose effects are passively transcribed into data points which are politically unjustifiable, of course. Algorithmic decision-making relieves human agents of the burden of the never-ending task of interpretation and also absolve or prevent decision-makers to justify their decision, if by justification one means the activity of seeking reasons for an action or reasons to support a decision, opinion, or other symbolic expression on the ground that it is right or reasonable. You see, it's a complete moral unjustifiability. Changing modalities in the techniques of the self. In algorithmic governmentality, individuals are far less passive products of domination, although some of them are, obviously. But they are not like those who, in the panoptic surveillance discipline architecture, were just passively, eating the norms and performing the norms. No, not at all. In algorithmic governmentality, computability dispenses with the need of visibility, optimization, and preemption. And preemption dispenses with the need of discipline. Techniques of the self become essentially techniques of self-branding. So what I mean is that the homo economicus that Foucault told about, based on Gary Becker and so on, now has taken the emergency exit. And now we have homo numericus, and homo numericus is neither obedient nor recalcitrant. He's completely recombinant. It's a recombinant subject. I will come to that in more details. So, but first, if I have a little bit time, Anarchive, techniques of signification, from knowledge to insights. Sorry, I jumped from one thing to the other, but I hope it all... In an algorithmic regime, neither the distinction between what has value as signal, attribute, or variable, and what has not, what is considered as noise, nor the intensity and relevance, that means the decisiveness or weight of each signal, depend on any explicit, recognizable institutional system. It depends rather on endogenous, dynamic self-learning processes of differentiation, ranking, scoring, pairing, profiling, targeting, tamed by the algorithm's objective function. And what's an objective function? The objective function is the formalization of the governance or the organizational interests, is the formalization of what governance or the organization wish to maximize or minimize. You can call that also the cost function, but that's what tame the artificial curiosity of algorithms. While it is often associated with ideas of rationalization, control, standardization of behaviors, even Bernard Stiegler talked in these terms, homeostasis, or regulation, by virtue of a confusion between the promise of generating order from chaos or meaning from noise, and a confusion with notions of anti-anthropic, organic or exorganic open systems, algorithmic governmentality, the prospects of automatic modeling and regulation of the social based on the collection and algorithmic processing of digital data available in massive quantities, rather than on politics, law, social norms, institutions, conventions, is not so much a matter of ordering or ordering the world, it's a matter of disordering the world. It is an intensification and a generalization of what had already been noticed by scholars in the field of economics of convention, like Alain de Rosière or Robert Saleh, who have long described the rise of a management culture that tends to favor quantitative performance and the decline of an administrative culture based on socially and politically determined rules. So you see where I'm heading. So, whenever rewards, punishments, scores, ranks, profiles depend less and less on individual behaviors and biographies than on digital statistical promiscuities and correlations evaluated against dynamic systems of differences, set in a way apparently endogenous to the social mediatic reality, I say apparently because, in fact, we know that this shift from representation to computation apparently blind to categories of genre, ethnicity, religious beliefs, and so on, because it bypasses the visual episteme and the human rationality and visuality. We know that they are prone to naturalize and recursively regenerate most effects of previous dominations. And that's what I call the shift from normativity to facticity. With dataism, which is the specific anesthetics of algorithmic governmentality or digital capitalism, indeed, the visual and linguistic episteme, the drive to document, test, and prove by reference to the physical, material ground truth, or through testimony, avowal, and so on, falls in value in favor of the digital algorithmic regime of reliability without truth, where one sees governing on the basis of knowledge power, that's finished, exit as well, and begins instead leveraging uncertainty through continuous machine learning and recursive feedback loop. So what we have is a shift from knowledge to insight. What is the difference, and why is it important? It's important because knowledge is always collective. We know that. It depends on agencement. After 3 days, I cannot say it in English, assemblage, collective assemblage with specific rules of enunciation, of veridiction in each discipline, and that's very collective. Knowledge gains in value when it is shared. Insights, it's exactly the same. Think of insight in high-frequency trading, for example, or in financial trading in general. The least your insight is shared, the most value it has. You see, that's the fragmentation of the collectives. Huh? Data is no longer informative. It's cut off from its antecedent referential context, so it's an anarchive. It is speculative, waiting for meaning that will potentially only be conferred on it by the recursive dynamic, the recursive dynamics of algorithm. The data has no meaning. It does not represent anything antecedent to that recursive dynamic. It participates in the morphogenesis of the production of forms, anticipating and bringing about their content. They are pure hyperstitions. So, I think I have how much time? 10 minutes. Oh, that's impossible. I'm still in the introduction, but yet it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, you know, there is something that algorithmic realism really shortcut, it's precisely incompleteness, you know? But that incompleteness that you find also in language. Why? Because the relation, which is not a relation but a resistance between the economy of the sign, that's very structuralist, between signifier and signified, it's not a relation, it's not even a tension, it's a resistance. You know, that's the reason why I feel quite happy to never finish my talk. Yet, I will try to finish though, you know. Anyway, I promise something that would be impressionistic. Huh? So that's it. So beyond, you know. So what we see is the rise of contingency. Contingency not as something that is perceived as something negative or something that has to be overcome through conventions, through discourse, and so on, but something that can be metabolized or that can be resorbed in the recursivity, in the recursive times of algorithms. You see? And I see that as a lawyer, I see that as a problem, but as a thinker as well, and as someone who speaks the most full of full of words. I see that as a problem as well. Rise of contingency. A way of deordering the world. It's not a mode of organization, it's a mode of disorganization, which is very much what Nick Land explained brilliantly in a simple phrase, saying that there is a common teleology between cybernetics and capitalism. Okay? So I don't invent much here. There's a behaviorist turn also that I will not talk about. It's the fact that, well, I have described that in other papers. It's a data behaviorism, which has a lot of consequences as well. The recombining non-subject rather than subject, than recalcitrant subjects of normativity. We don't have recalcitrant subjects of normativity. We have recombining non-subject of facticity. And then, hence, we have that algorithmic realism. So, I jump on my conclusion. Nowadays, I'll try to find a conclusion that fits, That's what lawyers do when they invent the facts to justify their decisions. But that's, that's the noble tax, that is the virtue of the judge, the fact that the judge makes the fact. And yes, I will close with that. In fact, the judge makes the fact. And it's a problem now, there are promises of predictive justice and algorithms of predictive justice. So these dispositives of algorithmic prediction of judicial decisions are praised because it would avoid wasting a lot of time, wasting a lot of money, and it's a way of, given the analysis of massive jurisprudence pre-existing, giving a score of probability that the case you bring to the court will result in a happy ending for you, Useful, no? Very useful. The problem is that there is a study that has studied what are the data that have been used to train and retrain the algorithms. The problem is that the data are only the data extracted from decided cases, not from, the cases that the parties, because if I go in front of a judge, it's because I have my own versions of the facts, and you have your own, and we disagree. But the algorithm is trained on the result of the decision of the judge, the final decision. So it obfuscates completely all the disagreements that were pre-existing. You see, and that's the facticity. That's the facticity that I find absolutely dangerous. So, in terms of facticity. Of course, facticity has several meanings. And for example, the fact that we are born in a certain situation, that we inherit all the past, is a kind of facticity that we cannot do anything about. And it's not something bad. It's all the facticity that is in the archives, but also that we can reinterpret, that we can scatter, that we can, thinking of Walter Benjamin, that we can explode in a way, but always for the sake of a humanity that is yet to come. That's a good facticity, if you wish. But there is also another meaning of facticity, which is the horrible facticity of fascism, which is the petrification of history and the dehistoricization of history, the horrible amnesia of the causes and contingency of the facts, is the fact of taking data, understanding data as facts rather than as effects of previous relations of dominations and so on, previous events. That's the horrible fascistic facticity. So I think the the way forward for critique would be, in fact, something, I don't know how to express it yet, but taking into account that tension, There's a good facticity and a bad facticity. So critique now must not be a nostalgic critique for non-dialectical concepts, but must not also succumb to the sirens of pure immanence, to the myth of immanence that indeed algorithmic realism proposes us to embrace. Why is it? Because in the context of algorithmic governmentality, the plane of immanence and the plane of organization are one and the same thing. So we need space. We need space to breathe. We need space between facts and norms. Sorry about that. I'm more lawyer than I thought at the end. And that's the reason also why I believe, but maybe the current regulation of AI is completely, I think, it's the kind of critique that worsen the problem that it's meant to resolve, because focusing on making algorithms fair, the limited black box, the technical subsystems, fair, accountable, and transparent, is a way of encouraging the myth of the possibility of indistinction and absolute objectivity that we could gain through algorithms. So I think I will let it there because I'm over my time. I had a lot of other things to speak. But that's yes, it's a bit contingent as a to speak. Thank you.
You're willing to take one question?
Yeah, sure.
As it comes, we have time for one again token question. So who would like to give a shot? There? Okay. Make it a good one, since it's one, right? Yeah. No pressure.
A nice one.
So thank you for this. Thank you also for defending the indeterminacy of things, which I think is very important. It seems to me you kind of offer two possibilities, right? Which one is to overcome contingency, which I guess is kind of like the thing of the past, right? And the other was to metabolize it.
Yes.
But it seems to me that the way that algorithmic governance works is actually can only metabolize contingency precisely by foreclosing contingency.
That you, sorry, I didn't understand well.
That we can only, through algorithmic governance, we can only metabolize contingency through actually precisely the foreclosure of contingency.
Yes,
it's like a foreclosure of the future,
absolutely.
right? So what we need, and I guess this is my question, or there is a question in there, I would say that what we need, and perhaps this is what you're saying, is not less contingency, but more, but of a different kind, right? The contingency of things, or what Deleuze would call the hesitation of things.
Yeah, yes, I absolutely agree, because in fact, what is, I just allow myself to read a little thing here, that this algorithmic generation of pure speculative space that appear to metabolize contingency, whereas, of course, it could never rejoin the real contingency, or what Lacan calls the real, because by definition, the real is not something that you can metabolize in any way. It's something that stays like that. It's the void, if you wish. It's the darkness of negativity. Oh, what a joy to pronounce these words here. I feel recalcitrant. It's great. But Louis Marin, who is a philosopher of art and historian of art, suggested that things are signs, and their materiality casts its shadow over the transparency of signifying representation. The thing is, in its full presence in the mind, has the function of obscuring the meaning it carries as a sign. It gives itself in the simple representation of itself instead of the representation giving itself as a thing representing another, in short, a sign. So I think, you see, what he says there is all about the enigma the enigma that is in materiality. Things, because there are things, it means there is the result of fatigue. They have stopped for a moment to move in all directions. There are things, they project shadows, and the shadow is the enigma that we will never elucidate, but the enigma that makes us think, that makes us speak, because we have to cross over that enigma in common, but by crossing it over, we don't neutralize it, we just displace it. And that's precisely what a judge does. When he decides, he knows that his decision is not adequate to justice. He knows that it's not just. And the law organizes by itself its own procedures to rediscuss and to rejouer, to play again that radical indeterminacy.
Thank you, Antoinette. One more clap for Antoinette.
Thank you.